became so fascinated with the relationship between how the human baby bonds with parents or not, and how that reflects into the adult level of intimacy that person is willing to give to a relationship, that I've done a lot of study, even how the brain forms, the developmental formation of relationship orientation in a brain. For instance, and most especially, we're all born egocentric. I mean, the little baby comes in and it's still learning about me. It has to find out where its fingers are, where its toes are. So we're all born that egocentric, narcissistic, what I call I of infancy. It's all about I. And the way we are evolved is that the parental love towards that baby is so pleasurable. Mommy smiles, baby cries, daddy picks it up. There's this give and take in the relationship. That is critical to that little brain becoming wired from I to I and thou. This is where relationship begins in the human brain. It's that play between parent and child. And we have about 3 years to really make that happen. And what's going on in the brain at that time is the limbic brain, what I call the hard drive of the brain. Because we have to have language to think with the frontal lobe. That's what makes us human. But when we're tiny, we don't have language to think. What we do have is a very sensitive limbic brain that picks up the emotions. And basically the two emotions are, am I safe or am I scared? So little ones raised in a joy-based, happy family, parents consciously dedicated, committed to that child's well-being. That little brain gets to do everything Mother Nature intended it to do. There's nothing to worry about. That little brain's protectors protect it. So the marvelous, amazing evolution of the brain gets to take place. And that child is most likely going to be just fine growing up and reaching its optimum potential. But when you put a little guy in a fear-based family who's always wondering, survival, am I going to survive this? He's not thinking it, he's feeling it, because obviously the most intense emotion any human has is survival. So if the nurturing is inconsistent, if the connection, the bonding is erratic or not there at all, if the baby is just crying all the time behind closed doors, that little limbic brain gets really stuck in the eye of infancy because no one's there to really develop the relationship piece. And again, we have 3 years for that window to close. And if that little brain is still stuck in the eye of infancy, it's going to now be growing up in a body that's getting bigger, the big boy body, but that little brain stuck in the eye of infancy is now going into arrested development because the shock of not being nurtured just really shuts down that brain's ability to ever really connect safely and intimately at a deep level with someone. This is how we create a narcissist. And we're seeing more and more of those narcissists in this country as more and more nobody's home to raise the children. It's like we have forgotten what family is for. There are a lot of industrial countries like us who are not suffering the consequences that America is right now, because we've kind of left the children out of the equation of how you build a strong nation. The countries that keep that tradition, that it's about family more than it is about fortune, that it's not about the money, it's about the home, and you're building a family, and that means you put your energy into that family. They are nowhere near the social pathology that America is suffering right now. We are unique, but we're also now very well known as a violent country and a country that doesn't value family like so many others do. And we're suffering those consequences. Kids are growing up, especially the boys, and boys tend towards violence much more than women, and that's what we're seeing. There have been 76 shootings since Sandy Hook. When we're saying no more, we won't take the violence anymore. I know there's a lot of discussion about guns from my research, and I think we can all see this, that a child raised in peace does not pull the trigger. So that's another part of my life, is when I recognized this several years ago, that as a school psychologist, there wasn't a day going by that I didn't have at least one little one in my office who was emotionally hemorrhaging. I started thinking, if I'm one school psychologist in this country, what's going on in this country? If I'm seeing this every day. And I started doing some research, and it shocked me how hurting our children are, how lost and hopeless our children are. And so I founded the America's Angel campaign to wake this country up, that you cannot build a strong nation on broken children. And we have left the children and our families out of the equation of what builds a strong nation. In 2001, I was invited to Washington, D.C. by Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey, the only woman who had ever been a welfare mom, and then went on to climb out of her victimized life and served in Congress many years. But when she put together what I had put together, she asked me back to speak to Congress and the Senate. And she said, give me a few months and we'll put these venues together. And we had a team that was going to go back with the America's Angel campaign. And maybe 2 weeks before we thought we were scheduled, she called and she said, never mind, Morgan. No one in Washington, D.C. is talking about our children and family these days. And I thought, oh my goodness, no wonder our kids are falling apart. There's nothing in this nation who is saying we have to prioritize the well-being of our future. And 2 weeks later was 9/11, and we know we've not talked about children and families seriously at the level that the America's Angel campaign needs it to be. If we're going to turn around the social trends, if we're going to stop fearing every time we hear there's been another shooting, and those faces of the children that are most dear to us are right there immediately. Where was it? Where are my children? I find this insane, not to address the core of why this is happening. And we have all the research to say that little baby requires the utmost, what I feel the utmost act of patriotism, which is to commit your life to raising up the child you brought in.
And do you think that looking at the core of issues that then creates narcissism, and then how that plays out within world leaders or politics
Oh, yes.
or corporate leaders. Do you think that everything, if you were to trace a lot of our issues in the world, could be traced back?
I have
that
no
as a
doubt.
condition?
Excellent question. I have no doubt. Because if you're raising egocentric, stuck, arrested development children who never had their opportunity to bond with mommy and daddy, then they are stuck. Big boy bodies, baby boy brains. Almost impossible for a relationship with a narcissist because he is the only star on the stage of his life. We are all just supporting actors because it's all about him. And then you have the leaders, the politicians, the doctors, the ministers, the CEOs that only can relate to how something affects them. And yes, a narcissistic nation is what we now have.